With the 2024 presidential election results already behind us, it's time for us to look forward to 2028. So in today's video, I'll be taking you through who I predict will win the 2028 presidential election. Now first off, we have to figure out who are the Democratic and Republican nominees in 2028. First off, on the Republican side, Vice President-elect J.D. Vance does seem to be the favorite to win the Republican nominee in 2028. Currently, he's at 45 cents per share compared to all the Republicans who are down below 10 cents per share, and thus he is currently the favored to win the Republican nomination. On the Democratic side, it's a lot more complicated. As of right now, 3 Democratic governors are topping the list as potential presidential candidates in 2028. Topping the list is California Governor Gavin Newsom, who is in a deep blue state and the most populated state in the union. He's at 18 cents per share, while Josh Shapiro and Gretchen Whitmer, 2 governors of swing states, Pennsylvania for Josh Shapiro and Michigan for Gretchen Whitmer, are at 13 cents per share and 12 cents per share each. So all of these candidates have some chance of being the Democratic nominee, and there's a lot more candidates to bet on, and it's right now far less certain. Nevertheless, here, it does seem like that Gavin Newsom is the favored, just because he governs a pretty large state, and there's essentially no chance that he ends up losing re-election. So the presidential matchup as of right now is set: Republican J.D. Vance versus Democrat Gavin Newsom. Now let's start filling in the safe states for both sides. These are states I expect to go to both parties by at least 12% in 2024. Starting off here with J.D. Vance, Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, the Dakotas, Montana, Nebraska's at large, 1st and 3rd districts, Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Missouri, Indiana, and West Virginia are considered safe states for J.D. Vance. Additionally, Alaska and South Carolina are also considered safe states. I will also have J.D. Vance winning the state of Ohio, his home state. As well as that, a state that's kind of similar to the state of Ohio, the state of Iowa, is also considered safe Republican. Of course, there was a Des Moines Register poll that had Kamala Harris up by 3 in Iowa. Of course, that was not very accurate. And finally, we go to Florida. This is a heavily Republican trending state. It voted for Trump by 1 in 2016, voted for Trump by 3 in 2020, and proceeded to vote for Trump by 13 in 2024. Now that wraps up all the safe states here for J.D. Vance. He's at 178 electoral college votes. Now for Gavin Newsom, he's going to win the states of Washington, Oregon, California, D.C., Maryland, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Vermont, and I would also have the state of Rhode Island and the state of Delaware considered safe states for the Democratic Party, as well as that the state of Hawaii and Maine's 1st congressional district. That's all the states I'm going to award at this point in time to Governor Gavin Newsom. And now going to the likely states here for J.D. Vance. Starting off here with the state of Texas. Texas is a state that has been considered to be trending heavily towards the Democratic Party. However, that shift did reverse in 2024, with Donald Trump winning the state by an impressive 14% margin. For context, he was able to win Fort Worth or Tarrant County by about 5%, while Joe Biden was able to win the county. He was also able to do really well in the Rio Grande Valley. He won counties like Webb County, Hidalgo County, Starr County, Cameron County, and Willacy County. These are counties that Republicans have not won in around the last 30 years or so. So this was a very impressive performance by Donald Trump. And I believe that J.D. Vance will probably win the state by also around 12% against Gavin Newsom, who is from California. Texas and California does not have the best relationship. Additionally, I will also have Arizona as a likely state for J.D. Vance. The reason for that is pretty simple. You saw that Donald Trump was able to win the state by over 5% in 2024. That was kind of surprising because the state voted for Joe Biden in 2020. But the state historically has not been super competitive, and it just shows that the state is reversing towards the Republican Party, and as long as your name is not Donald Trump in 2020, where there were extreme circumstances, such as McCain endorsing Joe Biden, so on and so forth, you're going to see Arizona in the likely Republican column, and thus the state will be likely Republican. Now that pretty much wraps up all of the likely Republican states. I do have Maine's 2nd district here as likely Republican. That's not too surprising. Donald Trump won the district by almost 10% in 2024. So now going to Gavin Newsom's likely states. Of course, he's still going to win the states of Illinois, New Jersey, and the state of New York by likely margins. That's not too surprising. However, Democrats did pretty poorly there in 2024. For example, in the state of New York, Kamala Harris won the state by a little under 12%. For context, Joe Biden won the state by a little over 23%. So that's roughly a 11% reduction in support in the state of New York. And another state with a more drastic example is the state of New Jersey. This was a state that voted for Biden by over 15%, but Kamala Harris only won the state by less than 6% in this year's presidential election. Another state where Democrats did really poorly. And that isn't it. In the state of Illinois as well, this was a state that voted for Biden by 16. Guess what? Kamala Harris is currently up in the state by less than 10%. And you're going to see some of these areas, especially in the more Democratic areas, Cook County for the state of Illinois, the New York City areas, Queens County, Brooklyn County, the Bronx County, counties and boroughs. These are areas that are going to heavily trend towards the Republican Party, at least relative to where they are right now. So although Trump is not going to win these electoral college votes and J.D. Vance won't either, it still will make a splash in the popular vote. So those are going to be likely Democratic states. The final likely Gavin Newsom state would be the state of Colorado. This is a heavily blue trending state, and it is a state that Gavin Newsom will probably end up winning here by more than 5%. I also have Virginia here as likely Democratic because it does encompass the Washington, D.C. suburbs, which are again trending towards the Democratic Party. I probably will also have Nebraska second as well, going as likely for Gavin Newsom. That's not too surprising. It's the Omaha suburbs. It's an area that has been trending towards the Democratic Party in the last 2 decades or so. For example, Douglas County voted for Kamala Harris by 10%. That's a pretty impressive margin, especially considering that Kamala Harris lost the popular vote by nearly 3 million votes. So now we go to the remaining states here, which are considered either leading or tilting for one direction. I'm going to start off here with the state of Nevada. So Nevada is a pretty interesting case. Many people thought that Kamala Harris was going to win Nevada. I had this race as lean Republican, and I was ultimately right. The state has shifted towards the Republican Party pretty dramatically in the last decade or so, specifically due to Hispanic voters in around Las Vegas. This was a county that voted for Joe Biden by about 9%, but Kamala Harris was only able to carry Clark County by a little bit over 2%. And so that shows the kind of Hispanic voters shifting away from the Democratic Party and pretty much forever towards the Republican Party. And essentially Hispanic voters make up about 20% of Nevada's population, which make them extremely significant and a deciding group in Nevada politics. Essentially, the Republican areas are also very strongly for the Republican Party, and Democrats really don't have a lot of areas where they can make actual inroads. So as of right now, I will have the state of Nevada as lean Republican. Now going to the next state here, that would be the state of New Mexico. New Mexico, of course, was a state that voted for Kamala Harris by roughly 6%, so you're not really going to see the state being super contested, especially considering that Kamala Harris is not the best Democratic nominee for this century or as of any time period. Essentially, Kamala Harris did pretty poorly in the Hispanic areas. For example, Albuquerque, this was an area that went for Biden with like 63-64% of the vote. You can see that Kamala Harris did really poorly here, Santa Fe as well, and some of the more Democratic areas. That's again due to the Hispanic vote. Joe Biden did really well with Hispanic voters in the state of New Mexico in 2020, and Hillary Clinton actually did better than Joe Biden in 2016, and you can see those Hispanic voters are trending away from the Democratic Party. I do still expect the state to not be super contested in 2028, but I do expect the Republican Party to be able to make some type of inroad, and I do believe that the margin will be about 4 to 5% as of right now, especially because Gavin Newsom is definitely one of the more liberal Democratic governors, which will probably hurt him in a state like New Mexico, where Hispanic voters are generally more conservative, and thus New Mexico is considered leaning towards the Democratic Party and not likely. Next up, we do go to the state of Georgia, where Democrats have indeed made inroads. Specifically in 2020, where Donald Trump was actually able to carry the state by more than 5% in 2016, Joe Biden was able to flip the state in 2020. And although the state did end up shifting about 2.5% to the Republican Party, the popular vote actually shifted 7 points to the Republicans, so the state actually trended towards Democrats by roughly 4% when you do the math. And you did see that Kamala Harris actually did pretty well in some of the areas that are more exurban around the Atlanta suburbs, specifically kind of a tier more towards the rural areas of counties like Gwinnett County or Cobb County, which did shift a little bit towards the Republican Party. In areas like Spalding County, Fayette County, Caldwell County, Paulding County, Cherokee County, as well as Forsyth County, you did see some Democratic inroads made by Kamala Harris. So those areas could end up delivering Democrats a victory in the future. The state will probably be likely Democrat by the 2040s. However, the problem is for the Democratic Party is that Gavin Newsom is someone who is perceived as extremely liberal. After all, he's the governor of one of the most liberal states in the United States, and his policy is probably too liberal for many of these suburban voters. Now, someone like J.D. Vance is not really a tested product, so we don't know how well he's going to perform. However, based on the 2024 election results, I do believe that as of right now, J.D. Vance is a narrow favored in the state of Georgia, though of course that could change over time. Now we go to the state of North Carolina. Now, North Carolina, the final margin there was kind of similar to the state of Georgia, probably a little bit more. I believe Trump won the state by a little over 3% against Kamala Harris. Now, Harris was able to make inroads in areas like Cowarbux County, Union County, and Gaston County, so the suburbs around Charlotte, but you did see that Donald Trump was able to make substantial inroads in the rural areas, especially in some of the more rural black regions like Bertie County, Halifax County, Hertford County, Northampton County. These were areas that you did see Donald Trump make pretty significant inroads in. And what you're going to see is that J.D. Vance is going to do even better in some of these rural counties, the more rural black regions in this part of the state, as well as the rural areas, where you're probably going to see Gavin Newsom do even better in some of the more liberal areas. Ultimately, though, you did see that Donald Trump won the state by over 180,000 votes. So that's a pretty big gap for someone like Gavin Newsom to end up catching up to, especially because Gavin Newsom is definitely on the more liberal end of the scale, and his approval ratings are not that high. So as of right now, I do give J.D. Vance again the edge in the state of North Carolina, probably by about 3 to 4%, which is considered lean Republican. Now we go to the state of Minnesota, where the dynamic in 2024 was quite interesting. So Tim Walz is the governor of Minnesota, and he was Kamala Harris's running mate. Nevertheless, here you saw that Kamala Harris did more than 3% worse than Joe Biden did in the state against Donald Trump in 2020. And again, Democrats ended up losing some of the more bellwether counties, such as Nicollet County and Blue Earth County. These were counties that essentially predict the right presidential election winner for the last couple of decades. And this time around, though, Kamala Harris did not do very well in the state of Minnesota. So what we did see was that there was some slippage for Kamala Harris across the board in the rural areas, in areas like Anoka County, which is considered a key bellwether in terms of the fact that it's a suburban county that's been trending blue, but a county that Kamala Harris did not do well in. You also saw that Democrats had some slippage in Dakota and Washington County. These were very populated suburban areas around Minneapolis. So the lesson here is that, again, Democrats did underperform, and someone like Gavin Newsom, who is as liberal as him, probably won't do too well. That being said, Minnesota has a history of voting Democratic, and I don't believe it's going to break its history in 2028. So right now, Gavin Newsom does have the advantage in Minnesota. I'm going to get rid of the states of Maine and New Hampshire first because they don't have as many electoral college votes. Starting off here with the state of Maine. The state results in the state of Maine were actually somewhat competitive, and we did see that Kamala Harris did win the state by a little under 7%, which is one of the closest results the state has been in the last few decades or so. That being said, though, I don't necessarily expect the state to be that competitive in 2028, although Republicans are going to continue to make inroads in the more rural parts of the state, specifically this area right here, the upper, more northern portions that border Canada. You're still going to see the Democratic cities like Bangor, as well as the areas around Portland, really save the state for the Democratic Party. That being said, though, the state will probably be competitive in the 2030s, and in the 2040s, the state could end up being solidly Republican. But as of right now, I still give the Democratic Party as the favorites. Something to look for is that if there's a high third-party percentage in 2028, you could see the state go to a ranked choice round, which would be pretty interesting. Essentially, if no none of the candidates get over 50%. Voters have to rank their candidates based on how much they like each and every candidate, and whoever is able to get to that 50% threshold after ranked choice voting ends up coming victorious. That being said, it's kind of relevant right now. Maine is probably considered lean towards the Democratic Party. Another state that is considered leaning towards the Democratic Party is the state of New Hampshire. New Hampshire is a very college-educated state. It's a state where, again, there's a very high education level, and that should help the Democratic Party. Now, that being said, though, Kamala Harris did not do well in the state of New Hampshire at all in 2024. You saw that Kamala Harris only won the state by 2.8%, which kind of really sent me scratching my head, because Joe Biden was able to win by 7, and Donald Trump did say some pretty nasty comments about the state of New Hampshire in particular. So this result was kind of surprising for me personally. That being said, though, again, New Hampshire, it's a state that's very college educated. J.D. Vance is probably still too inexperienced, even in 2028, for some of these voters to probably vote for him, and thus I'm going to give New Hampshire right now as leaning Democratic. Things can change, it's a preliminary prediction, but right now I have to give the advantage to Gavin Newsom. Now that's pretty much that for New Hampshire, and now we go to the 3 Rust Belt states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, which decided the election in 2024, 2020, and will once again decide who wins the presidency in 2028. Let's start off here in the state of Wisconsin, the only state that was decided by less than 1 percentage point in the 2024 presidential election. So in the state of Wisconsin, you can see that Donald Trump won by roughly 0.86 percentage points. It was the closest state of all of the swing states, as Trump won it by less than 30,000 votes. Now, the really key decider of the state of Wisconsin are essentially going to be Milwaukee County, which is the most populated county in the state of Wisconsin. Its suburbs, so the wild counties, Waukesha County, Washington County, Ozaukee County, as well as some of the more rural areas of the state. Essentially, in 2024, Kamala Harris was able to do pretty well in Milwaukee. She kind of ran the same as Joe Biden. She actually overperformed in the wild counties, but the reason that she ended up losing was because she did pretty poorly in the rural areas, specifically the working class regions. For example, I believe Grant County was a deep R+7 margin in 2020. It ended up becoming an R+18 margin. You go to some of the other areas, for example, Portage County. This was a county that voted for Biden by like 5, I believe. It voted for Kamala Harris by just over a point. So these were the rural areas that really sank the Democratic chances in winning in the state of Wisconsin. And as of right now, I still consider the Republican Party the narrow favorite here. The overall trend in Wisconsin is favoring Republicans just because how many Republican and rural counties there are, as opposed to the Democratic Party, who does have like the wild counties to bang on, but the wild counties are generally a bit slow in terms of how they trend. And generally, I just do believe that the Republican areas will outweigh the Democratic areas of the state. After all, there's only about 2 Democratic areas where Democrats kind of bang on for votes, that being Dane County. Kamala Harris netted about 190,000 there, as well as Milwaukee County. Kamala Harris also netted about 190,000 there. But Republicans have so many areas they can net votes, and Democrats are kind of at a ceiling for both. It's going to be really hard for Democrats to win the state of Wisconsin, though it's consistently going to be competitive. So right now, Wisconsin, I do have the state as tilting Republican, giving J.D. Vance the presidential election. However, we still have Michigan and Pennsylvania to get to. Let's go to the state of Michigan, where the final deciding margin was quite a bit larger than I predicted. I thought in my final prediction that Kamala Harris was going to win the state by a bit. In my final prediction here, I did have the Democratic Party winning the state of Michigan by a fraction of, I believe, a point. I had Kamala Harris up by like 0.4%. In my previous predictions, I always had Trump up by between 0% and about 1%. So it was a surprise to me that Trump won by 1.4. That was definitely on the higher end of any of my expectations. Anyhow, here, Donald Trump was able to win because of one thing. He did super well in Detroit. Now, of course, Kamala Harris still destroyed Donald Trump in Detroit County, but he did not clobber him as much as some of the previous Democrats did in the state. So Joe Biden won Wayne County over Donald Trump by nearly 40%. This time around, though, the margin got reduced to just 29%. And that was kind of why Donald Trump was able to win against Kamala Harris. That county alone netted Trump about 50,000 votes, and if Kamala Harris was actually able to keep her margin there, that would have indicated that she would probably end up at least been within 0.5% of winning the state of Michigan. Now, the reason why Wayne County shifted so much to the Republican Party is kind of because, again, the city of Dearborn, right, a lot of these Americans, Arab Americans, were not willing to support Kamala Harris. And of course, things would change in 4 years. They're probably going to be more, more supportive of Democrats, at least compared to 2024, but I doubt the entire trend would just reverse. And I also believe that, again, there's a lot of rural areas in the state of Michigan that could pump a lot of votes for the Republicans. And Democrats, they really don't have that much potential in Michigan, and the margin was quite a bit larger than I predicted, meaning that Republicans have quite a larger base than what I would expect. Thus, for all of those reasons, I do have the state of Michigan right now as tilting Republican. This will probably be controversial, and this is definitely subjected to change. This is a very early prediction, but as of right now, Michigan is considered tilting towards the Republican Party. Now, finally, we go to Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania was the least competitive of the 3 Rust Belt states, which was something I was able to predict. However, Donald Trump again did quite a bit better than I predicted, especially the working class areas. He was able to flip quite a few counties from Joe Biden, specifically Northampton County and Erie County, where counties he was able to not only win, but actually win a majority of the vote in. Additionally, he was able to flip the counties of Bucks County and Monroe County. Flipping Bucks County was something I really did not predict. And what we saw was that Kamala Harris essentially didn't do well in any area of the state. She really got clobbered in the rural areas, as she was predicted to be clobbered by, but she did even worse than what most people predicted. Yet the most shocking part of the state of Pennsylvania was in the suburban areas, specifically in the 5 counties around Philadelphia: Chester County, Delaware County, Montgomery County, Philadelphia County, as well as Bucks County. I think most people did predict that Bucks County was going to go for Harris, and there's still a few thousand provisional ballots there, so Harris could still win the county, but boy is the county really competitive. Joe Biden was able to win the county by like 5 in 2020. It doesn't stop there. In Chester County, Kamala Harris won the county by 15. Joe Biden won the county by 17, and Democrats were hoping that Kamala Harris was going to win by 22 or 23. They weren't really expecting that, but I think Democrats were expecting that the county vote for Kamala Harris by more than 20%. Instead, the margin actually shrunk. Another county where the margin shrunk was Montgomery, where Kamala Harris won by 23. Biden won the county by more than 25, and a lot of Democrats were expecting the county to be decided by more than 30. A similar story there in Delaware County as well. So you see that Kamala Harris was not able to do quite as well as many people predicted in the suburbs. She also got clobbered in the rural areas, and she lost the more competitive counties. Now, you could see a Democrat easily overturn about 60,000 votes and end up winning the state of Pennsylvania. The real problem for the Democratic Party in this matchup is that Gavin Newsom is way too far left for a lot of Democrats, even in a state like Pennsylvania. Specifically in areas like Erie County, Monroe County, Northampton County, Bucks County, these were areas where Donald Trump actually beat Kamala Harris in Pennsylvania. Kamala Harris was unable to connect with white working class voters the same way that Obama or even Biden did in 2008, 2012, or 2020. And again, Gavin Newsom is perhaps even more far left according to some people's perspective than someone like Kamala Harris, which is really problematic. And again, J.D. Vance is a stronger candidate than many people do perceive, which is a point in his favor. He also comes from Ohio, which does border Pennsylvania, another point in his favor, and thus I do have Pennsylvania as tilting Republican. So what is the takeaway from this video? Well, as of right now, I do predict a J.D. Vance victory. Though, again, Donald Trump's victory was always expected by me, he did a lot better than what I expected, and right now it just seems like that the Republican Party are riding some type of wave as of right now. Now, of course, either party could definitely clinch the White House in 2028, and there's 4 years to go. We don't even know the nominees for both of the parties, and who knows what's going to happen. Maybe Donald Trump's approval rating hits 60-70%, maybe some really big scandal ends up happening. We don't really know as of right now. So thank you for watching today's video. This is my preliminary 2028 presidential election prediction. Thank you so much for watching. Have a nice day. Goodbye.